Welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. This is Steve White, your host of This Dish, and let's take a quick journey around what happened on July 22nd on This Day in Sports History. On this day in 2001, David Duval finally won the major he coveted, and it may have been aided by an extra golf club. Not in his golf bag, but someone else's. Between 1997 and 2001, there was only one other golfer on the planet playing better golf than David Duval. Duval was the world's number one for 3 months in 99, he led the money list in 98, and he was second on the money list in 97 and 99. He won 13 tournaments in that span, including the Tour Championship in 97 and the Players' Championship in 99. He was a part of the 99 Ryder Cup team that won. He did well in the majors, but he always seemed to come up just a little short. A tie for second at the Masters in 98 and again in 2001. A top 10 in the 99 PGA Championship. He had been in contention heading into the final round of the 2000 British Open, but a 43 on the final 9 led to a final round 75 and out of the top 10. After a second round 73 in the 2001 British Open, it looked like Duval would have to wait a little bit longer. But on Saturday, Duval worked his way around Royal Lytham and St. Anne's like a local, and he carded the best round of the day with a 65. He was at the top of the leaderboard with 3 others, including Welshman Ian Woosnam. And I bring up Woosnam in particular because how he started off the final round on this day was unfortunate. Royal Lytham is a little bit unusual, well, it's a lot unusual actually, in that it starts with a par 3. Woosnam hit his tee shot with an iron tight. He rolled it in for birdie to take the lead. But when he was standing on the second tee, he realized he had 15 clubs in his bag, one more than the legal limit of 14. The extra club was a fairway wood, and he was livid at his caddy, Miles Byrne. If Royal Lytham started off with a par 4, he would have probably noticed the extra club before he started his round and avoided the penalty. Instead, since he played a hole with the extra club, he was assessed a 2-shot penalty. He would finish 4 shots off the pace by the end of the day. Woosnam didn't fire his caddy once the day ended, saying it is the biggest mistake he will make in his life. He won't do it again. Instead, he fired him 2 weeks later after he showed up late after a night of drinking. Back to Duval now. Duval had a 5 birdie, 1 bogey day to shoot 67, and he beat Nicholas Foss by 3 shots to win the Claret Jug. Duval finally had his coveted major championship. And then the bottom fell out from under him. The Open Championship would be his final win. He dropped to 80th on the money list in 2002 and outside the top 200 in 2003. He battled injuries, personal issues, and vertigo. He missed the cut by a mile in the 2004 U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills, playing the first 2 rounds in 25 over par. He made only 1 cut in the 2005 season. He's playing on the Champions Tour now and still looking for his first win there. But at least nobody can take away the major championship that he won on this day in 2001. On this day in 1963, it was the rematch between Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson. Liston had waited years to get his shot at Patterson for that first fight. After a meteoric rise to assume the spot of top challenger, Liston watched as Patterson defended his title with fighters who did not measure up to Sonny. When Patterson lost to Ingemar Johansson, the Swede spent more time soaking up the limelight of being a champion and had no interest in fighting Liston. Johansson and Patterson danced a little pas de deux for a couple of years, neither of them wanting to step into the ring with a man with 15-inch fists. Finally, in September 1962, Liston got his chance, and he knocked out Patterson in the first round to win the heavyweight title. 9 months later, the two would climb back into the ring again, but with pretty much the same result. When the bell rang to start the fight, Liston started to ring Patterson's bell, connecting with jabs, uppercuts, and combinations. People had barely had a chance to sit down and enjoy their first fist of popcorn before Liston connected with a hard right, putting Patterson on the canvas. He got up after a 2 count, but he wasn't vertical much longer, as Liston pounded him again. He popped back up again, but the end was near. When Liston sent him back to the mat for the third time, the fight was over after 2 minutes and 10 seconds, 4 seconds longer than their first fight. Speaking of repeat winners, on this day in 1990, Greg LeMond won the Tour de France for the third time. This was, I'll say, probably the easiest of his 3 Tour wins, and let me say that there is really nothing easy about any of cycling's 3 Grand Tours, with the Tour de France being probably the most grueling sporting event on the planet. And I'll be happy to argue that with any of you at any time, but I say that this was his easiest because his first back in 1986 came despite a huge intra-squad fight between him and Frenchman Bernard Hinault that I'll talk about more in depth in a few days. His second in '89 came 2 years after surviving being shot in a hunting accident, and a final stage come-from-behind win that I'll also have to dive more in depth later. But in the '90 Tour, LeMond was riding for a new team and had a pocket full of money after signing a 5-year multi-million-dollar contract. But after being surprised by an early Tour breakaway that put him in a 10-minute deficit, LeMond spent most of the rest of the Tour eating away at that time. It wasn't until after the second-to-last stage that LeMond finally was able to put on the yellow jersey and ride into Paris for the final of his 3 Tour de France wins. On this day in 1923, Washington national Walter Johnson became the first pitcher in baseball history to strike out 3,000 batters. He was facing the Cleveland Indians, and he struck out 5 that day to cross a barrier no one really considered possible before Johnson. It was such rarefied air that it would be another 51 years before Bob Gibson would become the second guy in the 3000K club. And in 1979, St. Louis Cardinal receiver J.V. Cain collapsed during a summer workout, and he died 2 hours later. Cain had played 4 years in the NFL for the Cardinals after being a first-round draft pick out of Colorado in the 1974 draft. He scored a touchdown in his first appearance on Monday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings. He had a solid 4 years with 1,000 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns before an Achilles injury sidelined him for the entire '78 season. The Cardinals reported to preseason workouts on the 19th. The 22nd was his 28th birthday, and it was a light practice at Lindenwood College. Cain ran a route, caught a pass, and then he collapsed on the 20-yard line. Doctors rushed to him and began performing CPR, and they were able to revive him temporarily. He was taken to a local hospital in St. Charles, Missouri, but he lost consciousness and died 2 hours later. Several months later, it was determined that the cause of death was mural coronary arterial circulation, which is a rare congenital condition that affects individuals in strenuous exercise. There were less than 10 known cases at the time, and the condition was undetectable except when an autopsy was performed. Cain had completed a team physical a few days before and showed no symptoms of any heart condition. Time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? Have you ever heard of nominative determinism? Well, it's the concept that your name has an uncanny influence over your career and life. That's all for today. This is your host, Champ Podcaster, saying have a great day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another edition of This Dish. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.